Hi everyone and welcome, this is the Apostate Prophet. Today is a fantastic day because today we are witnessing a debate come true that the entire world has been waiting for. A debate that will change humanity forever. Yeah, so I'm Ridvan Aydemir, aka the Apostate Prophet, a non-religious, free-thinking, simple guy, and my opponent is David Wood, aka the Dizzle, aka stealing is wrong because of God, therefore God. I'm really happy that David Wood has agreed to have this debate. This exchange will be a good example of exchanging very difficult ideas when we have opposing worldviews, completely different worldviews and beliefs. And it will be a great opportunity to learn more about each other. Today, I will mostly be presenting my arguments independently and arguing that morals are entirely man-made and that they have nothing to do with God. But I will also respond to and directly reference certain things that David Wood has brought up in his opening statement. So if you have not seen that, make sure to go and watch that before this or afterward. In his opening statement, David Wood makes several assertions and assumptions to make his point. He argues that humans have a sense of moral obligations and that these moral obligations are objective and universal. He claims that humans recognize and agree upon moral values because they are facts which exist independent from our minds, and that we merely find and name them. He argues that humans universally feel the responsibility, the obligation to abide by these morals, and that we most naturally perceive morals as authoritative commands. The reason for that, he claims, is that these moral commands come from God, which is why we perceive them and why we find them. His position is that God gives us authoritative commands, which we can find through religions, but we can also find those commands if we do not follow religions, because God gave us these commands, communicates through our conscience, and creates us in such a way that we are capable of finding these commands. As nice as it sounds, I want to go ahead and respectfully mark almost all of that down as completely wrong, and as David already predicted, delusional. Yeah, I'm sorry. One mistake that David makes is that he assumes that I will or must argue for objective moral values or objective moral obligations. He presupposes that objective moral obligations are real and that I must somehow explain them, or I must explain why this is the case. In reality, morals are not universal, they are not objective. They are not mind-independent facts which we somehow have to find. Morals are not perfect and can't be perfect, and they don't come from some mysterious source that we can only explain with God. Morality is made by humans. It's purely functional. I usually consider myself a good person, but I only do that within the traditional social context in which we define good and bad. I am compassionate, considerate, empathetic, because that's what I was taught, by people who were taught the same by others, because they consider these qualities good or virtuous. I adopted these values, I lived with them, and I see that it makes sense to consider them good. I could choose not to be loyal to these qualities. Many people often choose not to. I do have a temper, on the other hand. I can be cynical, stubborn. I can lash out and hurt people's feelings. I can be very disagreeable. These things are generally considered bad, but only because we find them bad. Because that's what we were taught by others who were taught the same over generations. And why have humans learned that over generations? Not because there is some objective morality which we magically find, which comes from an inexplicable source. No, it is purely functional. Being considerate is considered good because others like it when we are considerate toward them, because it benefits or pleasures them. It makes for good interactions. And we like it when others are considerate of our feelings and our rights and our desires and goals. Hurting feelings is bad because people feel hurt, as the name says. We feel hurt, disappointed, upset, angry, resentful. For example, if I'm traveling by car and my car breaks down, I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I don't have phone coverage to call for help, and I also can't seem to fix my car, then I will immediately start looking for help, because my best bet is that somebody can come and help me fix my car, or at least help me call help. If we now see a stranger and we ask that stranger for help, then we will have different emotional reactions depending on how that stranger responds to us. If that stranger decides to heed our call and help us, then we will be happy because someone else gave us hope for a possibility to get out of our desperate situation. We will therefore be grateful and thank that person and consider that a good act, one which makes us happy, one which we learn to copy and to reciprocate. If that stranger refuses to help us, then we will be upset by the rejection and lose a little bit of hope, which we will naturally not appreciate. If that stranger not only refuses to help us and even takes advantage of us and takes our belongings, then we will get angry because we will lose something and be harmed by this stranger. He will push us even further into our despair and violate our goals and our desires. It doesn't even need to be further described. The stranger will have literally harmed us. And for that we will dislike the stranger and interpret his actions as inconsiderate, rude, wrong, or even evil. In this example, we see one thing, that our moral values and our interpretations of those moral values don't come from the sky, but rather directly from our own social interactions and communications. From how the stranger responds to us in our desperate situation, we take that it is good to help. We like the help that we receive, and we thank that stranger. And maybe we even develop a good relationship with this stranger. And the next time that we see a person in despair, and we see that a person needs help, we will be much more likely to remember our own desperate situation and the help we received, and we will want to help that person in despair. We don't need to be given a mysterious divine command in order to be afraid when we are lost, or angry when we are harmed, and happy when we find our way out, and pleased when somebody helps us. If the earlier example did not take place between two strangers, but rather between two neighbors, then our actions and our responses would be even more impactful. If our neighbor desperately needs our help, and we go to their house and beat them up and take their food instead, then how can we expect to live in that place in the future? How do we think our life will be in such a neighborhood over time? Most healthy humans want to live their life in a happy, thriving way. Aristotle pointed out over 2,300 years ago that well-being, or flourishing, in Greek eudaimonia, is the highest good which humans ultimately want to achieve. His explanation was that every motive that we have, like wealth, possessions, status, or attractiveness, is only a means to achieve something else, whereas eudaimonia, flourishing, well-being, is the only human good which we desire for its own sake, because we ultimately want to flourish and be well. We don't desire it for something else. And in the end, it is much better to help each other and to make life easier for each other than it is to hurt each other and to give each other more suffering and grief, which makes life harder for all of us. We would all rather sleep without worry, knowing that we are in a safe place, than be on edge and fear all the time that our neighbors might break in while we are sleeping and take our belongings or even kill us, because we can't trust each other. This is not a certain knowledge which we have acquired, which needs to be commanded by a higher being. It is entirely logical. It is a natural part of the beings that we are, who can think, who can reason, who are intelligent, and who are social for their own sake. Think about it. A group of 3 people who become friends because they have things in common. They will expect each other's sympathy, friendship, each other's help and trust. If now one of these 3 people was an incredibly deceptive individual who goes and stabs his friends, then these other 2 wouldn't simply tolerate this, because they feel direct harm. They would naturally despise that and condemn this person and reject them as a friend, or maybe even take more drastic measures. This is quite normal, natural, functional. David gave the example of torturing an old lady for fun, and said that we would naturally condemn that, or universally condemn that. First off, most of us would most likely condemn that, because most of us know old ladies, or become old ladies. We know old ladies. We have old ladies that are close to us. They are part of our society, our families. Their company makes us happy. We relate to them. We feel empathy. We are communities with agreements, with obligations. If I did consider it fun, for example, to simply go and torture my grandmother, then she would feel hurt. The result would make her hate me. My action would have immediately destructive, dysfunctional, distressing impacts on our relationship and on everybody around us. Not to mention, we don't want senseless torture to happen to us. Why would we do it to somebody else? This is not a command that we need to receive. It is quite logical. And since we are all humans universally, and we have similar human experiences, it is then quite normal that we find it detestable, wrong, absurd to torture an old lady for fun, which is why we will condemn this and reject this and judge it wherever we are. And we would never normalize that. Since we are societies and we keep these morals, which we then give to each other as rules, as authoritative commands, it is quite normal that certain morals like these are universal. In all of this, where is God? If our despair, the help that we ask for, the good or bad response we get from a stranger, our reaction to their response, and what we learn from this is purely functional and logical, natural, existential, then where is God in this? God is not in the value of help and harm, nor in the obligation or responsibility to help and not to hurt each other. God is nowhere in this. I want to address one thing here, which I know David will bring up. When we point out that humans make their own morals and that they... When we point out that humans make their own morals and that they make these morals for functional reasons, many people then draw the false conclusion that we do accept or must accept the bad morals which certain societies establish, or which majorities establish, such as the Nazis and the Holocaust. But that is a wrong thought. It completely misses the point. When I am arguing that humans make their own morals for functional, useful, utilitarian reasons, I am merely observing and explaining that this is what people do. I'm not saying that people are always amazing and always right, and that they come up with the best rules. On the contrary, it is entirely possible that humans also have wrong ideas, that they delude themselves, and that they come up with very bad ideas, which eventually harm themselves, harm others, or harm their environments. Just because humans are intelligent enough to establish their own morals for their own sake, that does not mean that humans are not stupid enough, sometimes, to create very bad morals. How moral values and obligations come into existence is one question. How we judge them as right or wrong is a different question. Unfortunately, David also seems to assume that it would normally, without God, not be possible for me to judge the actions of Muhammad, for example, as right or wrong. And that I am able to judge Muhammad's actions as right or wrong because I am, without acknowledging it, appealing to a certain objective morality which all humans, regardless of time and space, have to abide by. That is wrong. Personally, I don't judge 7th century Arabia Muhammad for the child marriage or the slavery. Similarly, I don't judge Napoleon or Genghis Khan or Charlemagne or Alexander the Great. These are people of their own times. I wouldn't even talk about Muhammad if he was not the main figure of Islam imposed on us in our time. When I judge Muhammad, I am judging him as the presented perfect example for all humankind, because that's what Islam implies. That it brings the perfect morals for all humankind, for all times, and that these perfect morals are found in Muhammad's behavior. Yet in our time, slavery and child marriage are unacceptable. The real question would then be, why do I judge slavery and child marriage as wrong? Is it because of some divine command which we find in nature? It's not. Child marriage was quite normal in the royal courts of Europe and Asia over the last 2000 years. Slavery was considered normal in Muslim and Christian societies, and it wasn't Christianity or Islam that got rid of slavery. Take child marriage. Through our advanced understanding of anthropology, medicine, and modern psychology, we learn that child marriage is incredibly harmful to a child. It damages a child psychologically, physically. It restricts the ultimate happiness, the ultimate well-being of a child. And children are us. We were children. They are our children. We love them and we take care of them. They give us hope. They make us happy. They depend on us, and these children become adults like you and me. It is then normal that if we find out that something is incredibly harmful to children, that we take certain measures in order to outlaw and reject these harmful things. It is very clear, morals are are man-made. We make them for a reason. Morals are not facts independent from the human mind, as David Wood claims. Not even like numbers. You might want to argue that murder is wrong and that this is a fact, but it is not really a fact in the truest sense. It is only a fact because you want it to be a fact. Because humans almost universally find it wrong. Not because wrong is a quality of murder in and of itself. It is because we don't like murder and its consequences. If we say the earth exists, that is a fact. This is a mountain is a fact. We see the mountain, we give it a name, we point at it. The dog has legs is a fact. We see the legs, and we call them legs. The dog has 4 legs is a fact. We make up numbers to describe the fact that the dog has so many legs. Or so many, depending on where you are in the world. Water is wet is a fact. We observe what happens when water touches a surface, and we call that wet. Killing ends a life is a fact. The act of killing results in the death of somebody. Killing is wrong is not a fact. The wrongness of killing is not something that naturally exists independent from our mind, which we then merely need to learn and point at. The wrongness of killing is something that we, humans, decide and agree upon. It depends on us. If nobody judged killing as wrong, then killing would be nothing else but simply the ending of a life. We evaluate it and judge it as wrong due to its undesirable consequences. Consequences that we find undesirable because they threaten us. They prevent our peace. They increase our suffering. They make our societies unlivable. I mean, mostly we don't even say killing is wrong, we say murder is wrong. Because we decide what kind of killing is justified and what kind of killing is wrong. What we call wrong here is merely an expression of our attitude, of our feelings about murder, not something that is independent. Not a fact. If I ask David or the average religious person why murder is wrong, then they will either tell me that it is wrong because God says so, which would be a very absurd answer, or they will begin to explain to me why murder is wrong and why God forbids it, but their explanation to why murder is wrong will be completely about earthly things. About secular, societal, natural reasons, which make God completely obsolete. If murder is clearly wrong for logical, functional, natural reasons, then where exactly is God in this? If we find murder wrong because it is destructive, it harms our nature, us, and that we can find this by simple reasoning, then why would we argue that this is a command that comes from God? If murder is naturally wrong, which is why God forbids it, then does that mean that it is wrong independent from God, regardless of God? Which would mean that morals are independent from God, outside of God, or even that God adopts morals. It is all absurd. The only way out is very simple. Murder is considered wrong because it clashes with the human will to live. It eliminates mutual trust. It is dysfunctional and destructive to societies, which is why every society universally condemns it and bans it. It is purely functional. God is nowhere in this. There is so much more to say, such as, for example, the role that empathy and science play in morality, but I will leave that to the rebuttals. David's fault is that he assumes, as is so common, that I must account for some perfect morality, for independent, objective moral values and obligations that are out there, and that there must be something that we are accountable to, which is why we have moral obligations. This expectation clouds David's judgment. The idea that humans make their own reasons, that they don't have a supernatural force which they are responsible to. The idea that humans don't have a natural obligation to abide by certain moral commands, and that humans do come up with very bad ideas, with atrocities, with cruelties, is scary, even to David. It seems depressing and disturbing and looks like it must be wrong at first. But simply appealing to God when there is no reason to invoke God and placing God into that perceived gap will not solve the problem. It will only cover the problem up. I personally simply prefer to accept human nature as it is, to embrace our existence, to give up on fantasies and expectations of perfection, not to be scared of the fact that I can do whatever I want, and to recognize that I have enough good reasons to be good. That it's good to be what we call good, and that being bad is not a great idea and doesn't make for a good life. But that's just me. David will want to push me on that anyway. It'll be fun. Now it's time for David Wood to get back with his rebuttal. Not that there is much hope. Thanks everybody and see you soon. David, I will be waiting for your response. Hurry up.